Hey guys, tonight we are going to transport ourselves back to the height of French elegance, a time of massive wigs, silk stockings, and a palace so bright it was meant to outshine the sun itself. We are heading to Versailles under the reign of Louis XIV, the Sun King. You might picture this era as a pinnacle of sophistication, a place where everyone moved with the grace of a ballet dancer and smelled like rosewater and expensive imported spices. But the reality of standing in that famous courtyard was a little more complicated and significantly more pungent. While the architecture was designed to look like heaven on earth, the sanitation situation was, frankly, a nightmare that modern plumbing has thankfully allowed us to forget. You probably believe this palace was the most pristine place in Europe, a marble sanctuary where dirt simply didn't exist. The truth is that Versailles was essentially a crowded city built without a sewage system, crammed with thousands of people who believed bathing was dangerous, all packed into a swamp that refused to drain. It was a golden cage where the visual beauty was constantly at war with the olfactory reality. Before you get too comfortable and possibly fall asleep halfway through, tap like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy this odd mix of boredom and history. It keeps the channel alive and the stories just sleepy enough to help you drift off again next time. I'd love to know where you are drifting off from tonight and what time it is in your part of the world. It is always comforting to see how many of us are unwinding together across different time zones, united by a love for the past and a need for some rest. Now dim the lights, let the world outside grow quiet, and turn on a fan if you like that soft, steady hum in the background. Let your shoulders loosen and your breathing slow. This is your time to drift. No rush, no deadlines, no noise. Just you, a little warmth in the air, and the faint whisper of history waiting to unfold. So, settle in and let's ease gently into tonight's journey together. You are standing on the long, dusty avenue that leads from Paris, your boots heavy with the gray soil of the road. The sun is high overhead, a brilliant, unblinking eye that seems to be staring directly at the golden gates ahead of you. It is the height of summer in the late 17th century, and the air hangs thick and motionless around your shoulders. You are wearing the requisite attire for a courtier, or at least someone hoping to catch a glimpse of the king, which means you are encased in layers of heavy fabric that were certainly not designed for this heat. The velvet coat presses against your back, the linen shirt beneath it. It is already clinging to your skin, and the stiff collar feels like a warm hand gently choking you. Ahead, the Palace of Versailles rises from the landscape like a mirage. It glitters. That is the first thing you notice, the aggressive, blinding shimmer of gold leaf catching the sunlight. It is meant to impress you, to make you feel small and insignificant in the face of such calculated grandeur, and it is working. The slate roofs slice into the blue sky, darker than the deepest ocean, contrasting sharply with the creamy limestone walls and the fiery gold railing that separates the royal residence from the rest of the world. From this distance, it looks like a painting, perfect and untouchable, a structure dropped from the heavens by a god who loves symmetry above all else. You take a step forward, the gravel crunching softly under your heel, and you adjust the cuff of your sleeve. You want to look presentable. Everyone here is watching everyone else, a constant, silent surveillance of status and style. You see carriages rattling past you, their painted doors gleaming, horses kicking up small clouds of dust that drift into your path. The occupants of these carriages are hidden behind curtains or fanning themselves vigorously, their powdered faces visible for just a fleeting second before they disappear toward the courtyard of honor. You are walking, however, joining the stream of pedestrians who are drawn to this magnetic center of power like moths to a particularly expensive flame. As you draw closer, the sheer scale of the place begins to settle in your mind. This is not just a house, it is a statement. It stretches out horizontally, dominating the horizon, refusing to let your eye travel anywhere else. You try to imagine the amount of stone, the number of laborers, the sheer will required to drag all of this material here. It is a well-known fact that this entire area was once a humble hunting lodge, surrounded by marshes and forests, a quiet retreat for the king's father. Louis XIV, however, decided that he did not want a retreat. He wanted a universe where he was the central star. He commanded the swamp to become a palace, and through decades of toil and engineering, the land was forced to submit. But as you continue your slow trudge toward the gates, you realize that the land has not submitted entirely. The air changes. At first, you think it might just be the smell of the horses passing by, the warm, earthy scent of animals in motion. But as you walk further, the scent deepens, growing heavier and more complex. It is not just horses. It is a thick, invisible fog that seems to roll out from the courtyard to greet you. It is the smell of stagnant water, of mud that never quite dries, and of thousands of human beings living in close quarters without the modern conveniences we take for granted. It wraps around you, a stark contrast to the visual perfection of the gold and marble. You pause for a moment, taking a shallow breath, trying to acclimate your nose to this assault. It is strange how the eyes can see paradise, while the nose detects something far less holy. Historians still argue whether the smell was a sign of dominance, ignoring reality, or just simple negligence, a byproduct of a court expanding faster than its infrastructure could handle. Some say the king ignored it, as a way of proving he was above such earthly concerns as stench, while others suggest it was simply the inevitable result of crowding the entire French nobility into one location. Regardless of the reason, you are now walking through it. It is sweet, rotting, musky, and overwhelming all at once. You push forward, passing through the first set of gates. The crowd here is thicker. It is a chaotic mix of silk and rags, of nobility and servants, soldiers and merchants. You navigate through the press of bodies, careful not to let your coat brush against anyone who looks too grimy, though in this heat, everyone looks a little wilted. The ground beneath your feet transitions from the dust of the road to the cobblestones of the outer courtyard. These stones are uneven, slick with a mixture of mud, and refuse that you try very hard not to identify. You keep your eyes up, focusing on the architecture, which is safer than looking down at your boots. To your left and right, the ministers' wings stretch out, massive brick and stone structures that house the government. They are imposing, serious buildings, designed to remind you that the king is not just a man, but the state itself. You see clerks hurrying between doors, clutching bundles of parchment, their faces flushed with the importance of their tasks. They seem immune to the smell, Or perhaps they have simply lived here long enough to stop noticing it. You wonder if you, too, would eventually become nose blind if you stayed here for a month. It seems unlikely, but the human body is surprisingly adaptable when proximity to power is the reward. You reach the inner gate, the gilded railing that separates the common areas from the royal courtyard. The gold here is even brighter, polished to a mirror shine. You can see your own reflection in the metal, warped and stretched by the curve of the bars. Beyond this barrier, the ground rises slightly, leading toward the marble courtyard, the heart of the palace where the king's private apartments overlook the comings and goings of the day. You stand there for a moment, just watching. It is a theater, really. Every person you see is performing a role. A duke pauses to adjust his wig, making sure the curls cascade just so over his shoulder. A group of ladies in wide, structured dresses glide across the stones, their movements smooth and practiced, though you notice they are holding scented handkerchiefs very close to their noses. The heat radiates off the stone, baking the courtyard. You feel a bead of sweat trace a slow line down your temple beneath the rim of your hat. It is a sweltering, humid heat that makes the air feel solid. The lack of breeze is stifling. Versailles was built in a valley, a natural bowl that traps the heat, and unfortunately, the odors. You look up at the sky, wishing for a cloud, but there is only the relentless blue. The sun reflects off the hundreds of windows facing the courtyard, creating a dazzling cross-fire of light. It is beautiful, undeniably, but it is also exhausting. The palace demands your attention, demands that you look at it, even as the glare makes your eyes water. You decide to move closer to the edge of the courtyard, seeking the narrow strip of shade cast by one of the wings. As you walk, you pass a group of Swiss guards in their colorful uniforms, standing rigid and unmoving despite the temperature. They are like statues, their pikes grounded, their eyes staring straight ahead. You wonder what they are thinking, standing there for hours in this sensory overload. Do they dream of cool forests and clear streams? Or are they just counting the minutes until their shift ends and they can retreat to the barracks? The noise of the courtyard is a low, constant hum. It is not the roar of a modern crowd, but a murmur of hundreds of conversations, the clatter of hooves, the rumble of wheels, and the occasional bark of a dog. Yes, there are dogs everywhere. Small spaniels dart between legs, hunting hounds trot alongside their masters, and strays weave through the chaos looking for scraps. They add their own distinct notes to the aroma of the place, contributing to the mud that coats the cobblestones. You step carefully around a particularly suspicious puddle, grateful for the thick leather of your heels. As you lean against the cool stone of the wall, finding a brief respite from the sun, you observe the procession of a high-ranking noble arriving. His carriage stops, and footmen leap down to unfold the steps. He emerges, a cloud of white powder puffing from his wig as he moves. He is dressed in silver and blue, fabrics that must cost a fortune. Yet the hem of his coat is already stained with the dust of the journey. He ignores it. Here, appearance is about the grand gesture, not the minute details of cleanliness. He sweeps into the palace, surrounded by an entourage of flatterers, and you watch him go, fascinated by the performance. It occurs to you that this entire place is a contradiction. It is the most expensive, most carefully crafted building in Europe, yet it sits on a foundation of filth. The marble floors inside are polished daily, but the courtyard outside is a barnyard. The people are draped in diamonds and lace, yet they walk through muck to get to the king. It is a strange, mesmerizing balance of high art and low reality. If you think your apartment is drafty or your street is dirty, try a 17th century palace where the concept of waste management is essentially, hope it goes away. You push off from the wall, deciding to venture closer to the entrance. The pull of the interior is too strong to resist. You want to see what lies behind those tall windows, to see if the inside is as overwhelming as the outside. As you walk, you notice the statues lining the facade, stone figures of Roman emperors and Greek gods looking down on the chaos with blank, judging eyes. They seem clean, at least. Rain washes them. The people below are not so lucky. Bathing is considered a medical treatment here, something you do only when you are ill, and even then, with great caution. To submerge oneself in water is to invite disease, or so the doctors say. So everyone relies on linen. Fresh white linen, changed multiple times a day, is the standard of cleanliness. If your shirt is white, you are clean. It doesn't matter what lies beneath. You approach the marble courtyard, the inner sanctum. The stones here are black and white marble, a checkered floor that feels like a giant game board. This is where the king's day begins and ends. Above you, the balcony of the king's bedchamber is draped in velvet, the gold railing gleaming. You feel a sense of hush here, despite the people. This is the epicenter. This is where the sun rises, theoretically speaking. You are standing in the shadow of the absolute monarch, a man who has shaped this entire world to his will. But even here, in the most sacred part of the palace, the smell persists. It might even be stronger, trapped by the enclosing walls. It is the scent of a crowded humanity, of 1,000 bodies living in a space designed for show, not for life. You catch a whiff of heavy perfume, musk, amber, civet, drifting from a passing lady. It is a thick, animalistic scent, meant to mask the other odors, but often just mingling with them to create something even more potent. It is the signature scent of Versailles, luxury trying desperately to cover up reality. You look at the details of the brickwork, the red bricks contrasting with the cream stone. It is elegant, harmonious. The architects Laveau and Mansart have created a masterpiece of visual rhythm. Everything leads the eye to the center, to the king. It is designed to make you feel that you are part of something greater, something eternal. And in a way, you are. You are part of the great pageant of the French court. You are a witness to history in its most raw, unwashed form. The sun dips slightly, changing the angle of the light. The shadows lengthen across the courtyard, stretching out like dark fingers. The gold turns a deeper, richer yellow, approaching orange. The heat does not break, but the quality of the air shifts. It feels heavier, if that is possible. You can feel the fatigue of the crowd, the collective exhaustion of standing, waiting, watching. Everyone here is waiting for something. A glance from the king, a pension, a title, a rumor. They endure the heat and the smell because the reward is presence. To be here is to exist. To be anywhere else is to be nothing. You take a moment to inspect the fountains in the distance, visible through the arches. They are silent right now. Water is precious here, pumped from miles away by a massive, creaking machine called the Machine de Marly. It is a technological marvel, But it is not enough. The fountains can only run for a few hours at a time, usually only when the king is walking by. For now, the basins are still, the water green and murky, adding its own damp note to the bouquet of the air. It is another facade, the illusion of abundant water in a place that is naturally dry and swampy. Your feet are starting to ache in your boots. The hard stone offers no forgiveness. You shift your weight, watching a group of servants carrying a sedan chair. They look exhausted, their faces streaked with sweat, their livery stained. They are the gears that keep this machine running, the invisible force that carries the nobility from point A to point B, so their satin shoes don't have to touch the muck. You step aside to let them pass, hearing the heavy breath of the men and the creak of the wood. As you stand there, soaking in the atmosphere, you realize that Versailles is a sensory experience that no painting can convey. A painting cannot show you the dust coating your tongue. It cannot show you the heat radiating from the brick. And it certainly cannot show you the smell. You have to be here, to stand in the soup of it, to truly understand what it means to be at the court of the Sun King. It is glorious, yes, but it is also gritty. It is a diamond dropped in the mud. You look back toward the gates, toward the road you came in on. More people are arriving. The flow never stops. The allure of the king is a gravity that pulls everything in. You are caught in it now, too. You have survived the approach, the gauntlet of the outer courtyards, and the assault on your nose. You are ready to go deeper, to leave the blinding sun and enter the shadows of the palace itself. You want to see what lies behind those heavy oak doors. You want to see how the most powerful man in the world lives, and perhaps more interestingly, how he washes, or doesn't. The golden grill of the royal gate stands before you, a masterpiece of iron and gold leaf, topped with the royal coat of arms. It is the final barrier. Beyond it lies the king's private world. You take a deep breath, filtering the air through your teeth, and prepare to cross the threshold. The noise of the courtyard seems to fade slightly as you focus on that door. You are about to step out of the glare and into the complex, crowded, and dimly lit reality of the interior. The grand facade has done its job. It has lured you in. Now you must face what lies inside. You step out of the blinding glare of the marble courtyard and into the comparative dimness of the palace interior. The transition takes a moment for your eyes to adjust, the spots of sun, bleached vision slowly fading to reveal the opulent, cavernous vestibule. The air here is different. If the outside was the smell of hot stone and open drains, the inside is the scent of old wax, velvet that has absorbed decades of smoke, and the distinct, powdery aroma of thousands of unwashed bodies masked by heavy floral perfumes. It is cooler, yes, but the air is still. It does not circulate. It hangs in the corridors like a heavy curtain, preserving the breath of yesterday and the day before. You are swept up in a current of silk and brocade, a river of courtiers flowing toward the heart of the building. You don't really have a choice in direction. The press of bodies dictates your path. You are heading toward the king's bedchamber for the most important event of the day, the levee, the rising of the Sun King. It is early morning, yet the palace is already fully awake and frantically active. To sleep late at Versailles is to admit social defeat. You trudge up the grand staircase, your boots clicking on the marble steps, surrounded by dukes, marquises, and hopeful hangers-on. Everyone is jostling for position, using their elbows with a politeness that barely conceals their aggression. You reach the aisle D, Boyeuf, the bull's-eye antechamber, named for the round window high up on the wall. This is the holding pen. The room is packed. The hum of conversation is a low, constant drone, like a hive of very expensive bees. You find a spot near the wall, leaning against the cool plaster, and just watch. The tension in the room is palpable. Everyone is waiting for the door to the king's bedroom to open. Access is everything here. If you are stuck in this room, you are nobody. If you are allowed through that door, you are somebody. And if you are allowed through the door before everyone else, you are powerful. You notice the details of the room while you wait. The gold leaf on the molding is peeling slightly in the corner, a victim of the humidity and the lack of repair. The velvet curtains are thick with dust. It is a reminder that this palace is a stage set, designed to look perfect from a distance, but showing its cracks when you get too close. The people around you are preening, checking their reflections in small pocket mirrors, adjusting their wigs. You see a man nervously smoothing his lace cravat, his hands shaking slightly. He is probably hoping to ask the king for a favor today, a request that could make or break his family's fortune. The stakes are incredibly high for something that looks like a casual morning gathering. Finally, you hear the latch click. The sound cuts through the chatter instantly. The door swings open, and a hush falls over the crowd. A darker, clad usher stands in the doorway, scanning the room with the practiced eye of a bouncer at an exclusive club. He calls out a few names. The entree is familiar res, the lucky few who get to see the king while he is still in bed. You are not on that list, so you wait. The door closes again. The conversation resumes, but it is tighter now, more anxious. Minutes tick by. You shift your weight from one foot to the other. Standing is the primary physical activity of the courtier. You stand to wait for the king. You stand while he eats. You stand while he plays cards. Your lower back begins to ache, a dull throb that is the secret companion of every person in this room. You look at the painted ceiling, admiring the cherubs and clouds, wishing you could float up there with them, instead of being wedged between a sweaty count and a doused in lavender bishop. The door opens again. This is the grande levee, the moment for the wider court. You shuffle forward with the herd, squeezing through the doorway and into the sanctuary. The king's bedchamber is a riot of red and gold. It is overwhelmingly rich. The walls are covered in crimson brocade woven with gold thread. The furniture is gilded, the chandeliers are crystal. In the center of the room, behind a gilded balustrade that acts as a sacred barrier, lies the king. He is sitting up in bed now, propped against pillows that look softer than clouds. He is wearing a short wig. His morning hair, because the massive, ceremonial periwig is too heavy for casual wear. He looks human, which is almost shocking. You expect a statue. But you see a man with sleep in his eyes, yawning slightly behind a polite hand. But the ritual that follows is anything but human. It is a carefully choreographed liturgy of state. You watch as the room fills. The air instantly becomes warmer, the body heat of 100 men, raising the temperature by several degrees. You find a spot near the window, trying to catch a breath of fresh air, but the windows are sealed tight. Fresh air is considered suspicious, a carrier of miasmas and draughts that could strike the king dead with a cold. So you breathe the soup of the room, sweat, wool, old wax, and the sharp tang of the king's shaving water. The ceremony of the washing begins. You might expect a bathtub, perhaps a steaming copper vessel filled with soapy water. You would be wrong. Bathing, in the sense of immersing the body in water, is viewed with deep suspicion by the medical faculty. The doctors believe that hot water opens the pores of the skin, allowing the invisible, poisonous vapors of the air to enter the body and attack the organs. To bathe is to make oneself vulnerable to the plague, to fevers, to death. Therefore, the king does not bathe. Not in the way you understand it. Instead, a valet approaches with a silver basin and a small sponge. He pours a clear liquid from a crystal flagon. It is not water, it is spirits of wine, a high-proof alcohol infused with herbs like thyme, rosemary, or lemon. The king extends his hands. The valet dabs the sponge onto the royal skin. You watch the king rub his hands together, the alcohol evaporating quickly, leaving a faint, medicinal scent in the air. He wipes his face with a cloth dipped in the same solution. That is it. That is the extent of the cleaning. The belief is that this dry wash removes the grease and dirt without opening the pores to danger. It is a disinfection rather than a wash. You watch as he cleans his teeth. This is a newer habit, one not everyone practices. He uses a root or a small sponge to rub his gums. It is a primitive form of hygiene, but for the time, it is cutting edge. You notice his teeth are not in the best condition, a common affliction in a world where sugar is the ultimate luxury and dentistry involves pliers and a strong grip. Now comes the main event, the changing of the shirt. This is the cornerstone of 17th century hygiene. Since they do not wash their skin with water, they rely on linen to clean them. The theory is that white linen acts like a sponge, drawing the sweat, dirt, and toxins out of the body and trapping them in the fabric. Therefore, if you change your shirt, you are effectively cleaning yourself. The king changes his shirt 3, sometimes 5 times a day. If his linen is white and crisp, he is considered immaculately clean. The removal of the nightshirt and the donning of the day shirt is not a simple task. It is a political minefield. You watch the first valet de chamber step forward. He holds the fresh shirt, warmed by a fire so the king does not feel a chill. But he does not hand it to the king. That would be too simple. He holds it, waiting. He looks around the room. The hierarchy dictates that the highest ranking person present must hand the shirt to the king. Today, the king's brother, the Duke of Orleans, is present. The valet hands the shirt to the duke. The duke bows low, then approaches the balustrade. The king removes his nightshirt. For a brief second, the Sun King is half naked. You see the pale skin of his chest, the aging body of a man who has ruled for decades. It is a moment of vulnerability that is instantly covered as the duke slips the fresh shirt over the king's head. The courtiers watch this with rapt attention. To hand the shirt is a sign of immense favor. It means you are close to the center of the universe. The king adjusts the cuffs. The lace is exquisite, costing more than a peasant would earn in a lifetime. He stands up now, and the valets swarm him to help him with the rest of his dressing. He steps into his breeches. Stockings are rolled up his legs. Garters are tied. It is strange to watch a grown man, the most powerful monarch in Europe, being dressed like a doll. He does not lift a finger to help. He stands there, passive, allowing his body to be adorned. You notice the shoes. They are red-heeled, a symbol of royal authority. Only those in the king's favor are allowed to wear red heels. He slides his feet into them, and instantly he is taller, more imposing. The transformation is taking place. He is shedding the mortal man and becoming the institution. Then, the wig. A barber brings it forward on a stand. It is massive, a cascading waterfall of dark curls that falls halfway down his back. It is powdered and perfumed, designed to hide the thinning hair beneath and to add majesty to his silhouette. The king bows his head slightly, and the wig is placed upon him. He settles it, adjusting the fit. When he looks up, the change is complete. The sleepy man you saw 10 minutes ago is gone. In his place is Louis XIV, the state, the God-given ruler of France. The wig frames his face like a dark halo. The final touch is the hat, a wide, brimmed felt creation adorned with ostrich feathers. He places it on his head, then immediately takes it off to sweep a bow to the gathered courtiers. You bow back, sweeping your own hat low, bending your knee. The room ripples with the movement of bowing bodies, like a field of wheat in the wind. The king begins to move toward the door. The crowd parts instantly, forming a narrow corridor of humanity. You press yourself back against the wall to give him space. As he passes, you catch his scent. It is not the smell of soap. It is a complex, heavy odor. It is the metallic tang of sweat, the yeasty smell of the unwashed scalp beneath the wig, layered with the sharp alcohol of the face wash and a heavy dose of musk and orange blossom perfume. It is a human smell, raw and potent, barely contained by the finery. Historians still argue whether the king's heavy use of perfume was a personal preference or a necessary courtesy to those who had to stand downwind of him. But standing this close, you feel it is likely a bit of both. He passes you, his gaze fixed on the middle distance. He does not look at you. You are part of the furniture, part of the backdrop of his glory. He is heading to Mass, and then to the council. His day is a rigid schedule of public acts. Even his prayers are a performance. The room begins to empty as the king leaves. The courtiers swarm after him, like a school of fish following a shark. You stay behind for a moment, lingering in the bedchamber. The air is stiflingly hot now. The fire in the hearth, combined with the body heat, has made the room an oven. You look at the bed. The sheets rumpled where the king slept. The valets are already moving in to strip it and remake it. You notice a small detail on the floor. A dropped handkerchief, lace, edged and stained with snuff. Someone dropped it in the crush. It is a small piece of debris in the wake of the great ship of state. You look at the silver basin where the king washed his hands. The liquid is cloudy now. That is the extent of the dirt removed from the king today. The rest remains on him, trapped under the silk and velvet. You decide to leave the room before the valets kick you out. You walk back through the bull's eye antechamber. It is empty now. The waiting is over. The dust motes dance in the shafts of light coming from the high window. You feel a strange sense of exhaustion, even though all you did was stand and watch. The intensity of the court, the sheer pressure of so many egos in one room, is draining. As you walk back toward the grand staircase, you think about the concept of clean. To you it means soap, water, scrubbing. To the people here, it means appearance. If you look clean, you are clean. If your cuffs are white, your hands must be. It is a world of surface over substance. The velvet coats hide dirty shirts, the wigs hide greasy hair, the heavy perfumes hide the smell of bodies. It is a dazzling deception. You descend the stairs, your hand trailing on the marble banister. It feels sticky. You recoil slightly, wiping your hand on your coat. Even the marble sweats here. The humidity of the crowded palace condenses on the cold stone, creating a film of moisture that collects the dust and grime of the air. Nothing is truly dry. Nothing is truly fresh. You head toward the long gallery, the hall of mirrors, which connects the king's apartments to the rest of the palace. You need to walk, to move your legs after standing still for so long. The hall is empty for the moment, the morning light streaming in through the 17 arched windows, reflecting off the 17 arched mirrors opposite them. It is a tunnel of light. You walk down the center, your reflection multiplying on your left. You look tired. The heat is already getting to you. But you have witnessed the spectacle. You have seen the Sun King rise. You have seen the intricate dance of the shirt. It is a story you can tell your grandchildren. How you stood in the golden bedroom and watched the most powerful man on earth clean his hands with alcohol and call it a bath. You paused to look out one of the windows into the gardens. The geometric perfection of the hedges and paths stretches out to the horizon. It is so ordered, so controlled. It stands in such stark contrast to the organic, messy reality of the bodies inside the palace. The king controls nature, forcing the trees to grow in lines and the water to shoot into the sky. But he cannot control the biology of his own subjects. He cannot legislate away the sweat or the need for a wash. He can only hide it under layers of linen and lace. You turn back to the corridor. The day is just beginning. There are rumors of a grand feast later, and a promenade in the gardens if the weather holds. You have hours to kill before then. You need to find a place to rest, perhaps a corner where the smell isn't so strong. But as you walk deeper into the palace, you realize that the smell is everywhere. It is in the wood, in the curtains, in the stone itself. It is the smell of Versailles, and there is no escaping it. You adjust your own collar, feeling the dampness of your shirt against your neck. You are starting to understand why they change their linen so often. In this heat, in this crowd, a fresh shirt feels like a new lease on life. You make a mental note to find your own valet, or at least a dark corner, and change before the midday meal. You want to be clean, at least by the standards of 1682. The noise of the court is rising again, echoing off the stone walls. The machine of the monarchy is up and running. The wheels are turning, greased with flattery and ambition. You step back into the flow of the crowd, ready to drift along with the current. You are a part of it now, a small particle in the glittering, grimy orbit of the king. The morning ritual is done, but the performance of the day has only just begun. You keep your head up, your expression bored and detached, just like everyone else. You are learning the game. You slip away from the bustling epicenter of the king's apartments, needing a moment of reprieve from the suffocating crush of the levee. You veer off the main axis of the state apartments and find yourself navigating the labyrinthine network of smaller corridors, stairwells, and passageways that stitch the massive palace together. If the hall of mirrors is the face of Versailles, these dim, narrow arteries are its intestines. The air here is cooler, damp with the chill of stone that never sees the sun, and the lighting is scarce. Windows are a luxury reserved for the grand rooms, so here you guide yourself by the faint, flickering glow of oil lamps mounted on the walls at irregular intervals. As you walk, the polished marble under your feet gives way to simpler parquet or stone that has been worn smooth by the passage of thousands of frantic footsteps. You are searching for something that, in the modern world, would be the most basic of necessities, but here, in the glorious sanctuary of the Sun King, is a treasure rarer than diamonds a bathroom. The architectural brilliance of Versailles, with its soaring ceilings and mathematically perfect gardens, has a glaring oversight. There are practically no toilets. You navigate a particularly narrow hallway, brushing shoulders with a servant carrying a pile of firewood. He keeps his head down, his eyes fixed on the floor, moving with the hurried efficiency of someone who knows he is invisible to the nobility until he drops something. You step aside to let him pass, pressing your back against the cool plaster of the wall. As you do, you inhale sharply. The smell here is distinct. It is not the general musk of the courtyard or the heavy perfume of the bedchamber. It is the sharp, stinging scent of ammonia, ancient and layered, soaking into the very woodwork of the palace. It is a known fact that when Louis XIV expanded his father's hunting lodge into this sprawling complex, the architects prioritized symmetry and grandeur over plumbing. There are perhaps 300 residences in the palace, housing thousands of people, and yet the number of designated privies or water closets can be counted on one's fingers and toes. And most of those are locked, the private domain of the royal family or the highest princes. For everyone else, the dukes, the counts, the visiting dignitaries, and you, the world is your restroom. You continue your search, your boots echoing softly in the semi-darkness. You pass a beautiful alcove, an architectural niche likely designed to hold a statue of a Greek muse. Instead of a statue, however, you find a small, damp puddle pooling in the corner, reflecting the dim lamplight. You step gingerly around it. It is a common sight. When nature calls in a palace with no bathrooms, the courtiers, desperate and trapped by etiquette, make do with what is available. Stairwells, unused fireplaces, dark corners, and behind heavy velvet curtains all become makeshift conveniences. You spot a figure ahead of you in the shadows of a winding staircase. It is a nobleman, judging by the glint of silver thread on his coat. He is facing the wall, his posture rigid. You avert your eyes instinctively, a silent social contract that everyone here obeys. You pretend you do not see him, and he pretends he is not doing what he is clearly doing. It is a strange, silent dance of denial. You walk past him, your gaze fixed firmly on the molding of the ceiling, listening only to the soft rustle of fabric as he adjusts his clothing. This is the reality of the gilded cage. The most refined people in Europe, dressed in the finest silks, are reduced to skulking in hallways like stray cats. You finally find a relatively secluded bench near a window that overlooks a small, internal courtyard. It is not a bathroom, but it is a place to sit and rest your legs. You collapse onto it, grateful for the pause. Outside the window, you can see the gray stone walls of the opposing wing. A drain pipe runs down the side, stained green and brown with age. You watch a bird land on the gutter, chirping brightly, completely unaware of the complex social hierarchy playing out inside the glass. As you sit, you observe the traffic in the corridor. A group of ladies passes by, their wide pannier skirts taking up nearly the entire width of the hall. They are laughing, their fans fluttering like butterflies. You wonder how they manage. The logistics of female fashion at Versailles are formidable. Those skirts are supported by frames of whalebone or willow, creating a cage of fabric that makes simple movements difficult and fitting through narrow doors an art form. Using a chamber pot in such an outfit requires the dexterity of an acrobat. You recall seeing a lady earlier in the day carrying a strange, boat-shaped object made of porcelain. It looked like a gravy boat, but you know better. It is a bordelot, a portable chamber pot designed specifically for women to use under their skirts. Legend has it that the device is named after a Jesuit preacher, Louis XIV, whose sermons were so long and so mesmerizing that the ladies of the court refused to leave their seats to relieve themselves, preferring instead to bring these little vessels into the chapel. Whether the story is true or not, the object is a testament to human ingenuity in the face of discomfort. You can imagine the scene: a packed church, a droning voice from the pulpit, and the silent, desperate struggle of a duchess trying to slide a cold porcelain dish under layers of petticoats without making a sound or a mess. The corridors are not just for transit or relief. They are also the nervous system of the court's gossip. Because there are no private offices and few private rooms, business is conducted here, in the transitional spaces. You watch two men huddled in an alcove further down the hall, their heads close together, whispering. One hands the other a folded piece of paper. Is it a love letter? A petition to the king? A plot against a rival? You will never know. In these dark arteries of the palace, secrets are traded as freely as snuff. The lack of privacy forces intimacy. You cannot keep a secret when there are no walls to hide behind. You decide to move on, the draft from the window chilling the sweat on your neck. You head toward the north wing, hoping to find a clearer path to the gardens. As you walk, you notice the condition of the walls. Up close, away from the staterooms, the maintenance is lacking. There are smudge marks at shoulder height, where thousands of people have leaned against the plaster. There are scratches from swords and scabbards. The velvet rope barriers that are meant to guide the crowds are frayed and greasy to the touch. It is a reminder that this house is lived in, aggressively and messily, by too many people. You turn a corner and nearly collide with a porte chaise, a sedan chair being carried indoors. This is a privilege reserved for the very old, the very sick, or the very royal. The chair is enclosed, a little wooden box with windows, carried by two straining porters. Inside, you catch a glimpse of an elderly woman, her face painted white with lead makeup, her head lolling against the padded velvet. She looks like a ghost being ferried across the river Styx. But she is likely just going to a card game in the Queen's apartments. The porters grunt as they maneuver the chair around a tight bend, the wooden poles scraping against the wall, leaving a fresh white scar in the paint. Following the sedan chair is a servant carrying a large, covered bucket. You know exactly what is in that bucket. It is the contents of a chaise per se, a pierced chair or commode, being taken away to be emptied. Hopefully, it is being taken far away, but you know the reality. Often, these buckets are simply dumped into the nearest cesspool or In the worst cases, out a window into an internal courtyard if the servant is feeling lazy. Historians still argue whether the infamous mandate, "Perish the thought of throwing waste from the window," was actually followed, or if it was merely a hopeful suggestion that everyone ignored after dark. Judging by the smell wafting up from the courtyards on hot nights, you suspect the latter. The chaise passée itself is a fascinating object, a throne of a different kind. For the king, using the commode is not a private act, but a public one. He has a specific cabinet des affaires, a room dedicated to this function, but he is often attended by select courtiers even there. To be invited to speak to the king while he is on the chair of business is a high honor. It suggests a level of intimacy that others can only dream of. It effectively says, "I trust you enough to be human in front of you." You try to imagine discussing national policy or the movement of troops while sitting on a wooden box, but the image is too absurd. Yet, here it is the height of protocol. You, however, do not have a velvet-covered box. You have the dark corner under the stairs. You pass one such corner now, and the scent is overpowering. Someone has evidently been here very recently. You breathe through your mouth, hurrying your pace. It is a stark reminder that beneath the gold leaf and the glory, we are all biological machines. The palace tries to deny this, to cover it with ritual and incense, but the biology always wins. The lack of plumbing also means a lack of water for cleaning. You notice the dust accumulating on the baseboards, thick, gray rolls of fluff that dance in the draught. Without running water to scrub the floors, the servants rely on dry sweeping and waxing. They polish the dirt rather than removing it. The floors gleam, yes, but if you were to scrape the surface, you would find layers of history compacted into grime. It is a geological record of the court mud from the boots of 1670, powder from the wigs of 1675, crumbs from the feasts of 1680. You find yourself in a gallery filled with busts of Roman emperors. Their stone eyes stare blankly at the chaos. You wonder if ancient Rome smelled this bad. Probably. But there is something particularly jarring about the contrast here. You look at a bust of Augustus, noble and serene, and then you look at the floor beneath him, where a muddy footprint has dried. The sublime and the squalid, always side by side. You pause to adjust your stocking, which has begun to sag. As you bend down, you see a small door hidden in the wood paneling, almost invisible if you weren't looking for it. It is a service door, leading to the backstage of Versailles, the tiny, cramped rooms where the servants live. These rooms are often without windows or ventilation, tucked into the crawl spaces between floors. If the courtiers are cramped, the servants are packed like sardines. You can hear faint sounds coming from behind the panel, the clattering of pots, a stifled laugh, the sound of water being poured. There is a whole other city living inside the walls of this one, a shadow population that makes the magic happen. You straighten up and continue your journey. You are heading toward the Mars room, hoping to catch the tail end of a musical performance. The corridors seem to stretch on forever, a funhouse mirror of luxury. You pass a window that looks out onto the South Parter. The view is breathtaking. The orangery, the Swiss lake, the vast expanse of manicured nature. It is clean, green, and open. It feels like a different planet compared to the stuffy, dim tunnel you are walking in. You press your hand against the glass, feeling the heat of the sun on the other side. You want to be out there, in the air, but you are bound by duty to stay inside, to be seen, to play the game. As you walk, you notice the apartments, assigned to the lesser nobles. They are essentially partitioned sections of the hallway or small rooms carved out of larger ones. You pass a door that is slightly ajar and glimpse a room no bigger than a closet. Inside, a count is trying to dress, his valet squeezing past the bed to reach the wardrobe. There is no space. The bed takes up 90% of the room. This man is a ruler of a province, a wealthy landowner, yet he lives in a shoebox just to be near the king. He sacrifices comfort for proximity. You wonder if it is worth it. Sleeping in a closet that smells of the previous tenant's dinner, just for the chance to hold a candlestick for the monarch. The corridor widens slightly as you approach the grand apartments. The decoration becomes more elaborate. The simple plaster gives way to marble facing, and the oil lamps are replaced by crystal chandeliers, though they are not lit at this hour. The natural light from the larger windows floods in, washing away the shadows of the service halls. You feel a sense of relief stepping back into the light. The oppression of the dark, smelly corridors lifts slightly, but the memory of the smell lingers in your nose. You can still taste the metallic tang of the ammonia. You realize that this is the true secret of Versailles. The gold is for the eyes, the music is for the ears, but the smell is the truth of the body. It is the inescapable reality that no amount of etiquette can banish. You see a group of Swiss guards standing at the intersection of two hallways. They are the traffic cops of the palace, ensuring that no one goes where they aren't supposed to. They look bored, leaning on their halberds. One of them shifts his weight and scratches his nose. You wonder where they go when nature calls. Do they have a special guard's toilet, or do they, too, have a favorite dark corner? You suspect the latter. You finally reach the entrance to the Mars room. The doors are open, and the sound of a harpsichord drifts out, light and mathematical. It is a cleansing sound, precise and clean. You take a deep breath, trying to flush the stale air from your lungs, and prepare to re-enter the stage. You smooth your coat, check your cuffs, and put on your court face, a mask of polite disinterest. Before you step in, you look back one last time at the corridor you just traversed. It looks empty now, a long, dark tunnel receding into the distance. It is silent, save for the settling of the building. But you know what hides in those shadows. You know the stains on the floor and the secrets in the alcoves. You know that the gleaming palace is just a thin shell over a teeming, messy, biological reality. You step into the Mars room, the light hitting your face. You are back in civilization, back in the world of art and culture. But as you bow to a passing duchess, you notice she is holding a pomander, a ball of perfumed spices, directly under her nose. She knows. Everyone knows. You give her a knowing nod, a silent acknowledgement of the shared struggle. You are all survivors of the corridor, veterans of the search for the missing bathroom. The music swells, a complex fugue that weaves disparate notes into a harmonious whole. It is a metaphor for the palace itself, 1,000 messy, discordant human lives forced into a structure of rigid, beautiful order. You find a spot near the wall, careful not to lean too hard on the silk wallpaper, and let the music wash over you. For a moment, you can forget the smell. For a moment, you can believe in the illusion. But only for a moment. because eventually you will have to walk back through that corridor. And eventually you, too, will need to find a dark corner. The music in the Mars room fades into a polite ripple of applause, signaling the shift in the day's rhythm. Your stomach gives a low, treacherous growl, audible only to you, or so you hope, reminding you that the spiritual nourishment of a harpsichord fugue does little to sustain the body. It is time for the midday meal, the grand couvert, another ritualistic performance where the act of eating is elevated to a state ceremony. You join the migration of hungry, tired courtiers moving toward the king's dining antechamber. The crowd seems to have a singular mind, flowing like water through the gilded doors, everyone maneuvering for a spot with a clear line of sight. Because today, like most days, you will not be eating. You will be watching the king eat. You find a place against the wall, behind a velvet rope that separates the spectators from the stage. The room is set. A square table sits in the middle, covered in a tablecloth of snowy white damask that falls all the way to the floor. The fabric is so crisp, it looks like it was carved from marble. On it sits the cadenas, a magnificent golden box shaped like a ship. This is not a centerpiece for decoration, it is a fortress for condiments. Inside are the king's salt, pepper, and napkins, kept under lock and key, to prevent any would-be assassin from sprinkling arsenic onto the royal seasoning. It is a reminder that in this world of absolute power, paranoia is just a part of the table setting. But where is the food? To answer that, you have to mentally travel away from this room, out of the palace, and across the street. The kitchens of Versailles are not in the main building. The architects, terrified of the smell of cooking fat and the very real risk of fire, banished the culinary operations to the Grand Common, a massive service wing located hundreds of yards away. This decision, while sensible for safety, is a disaster for gastronomy. Every morsel that reaches the king's lips must survive a perilous journey that historians still argue was the primary reason Louis XIV had such a famously iron stomach. Imagine, if you will, the journey of a single bowl of soup. It begins in the chaotic, infernal heat of the Grand Common kitchens. There, hundreds of cooks, scullery maids, and turnspits toil in a haze of wood smoke and steam. The hygiene standards here are flexible. Dogs roam freely among the sacks of flour, snapping at scraps that fall from the chopping blocks. The water used for washing vegetables comes from the same reservoirs that feed the fountains, water that is often green with algae and teeming with microscopic life. But the fire kills most things, or at least cooks them into submission. Once the soup is prepared, it is poured into a silver tureen. Then begins the procession. A cortege of officers, guards, and servants forms up, looking for all the world like a religious pilgrimage. The mate of the king, as the entire meal is collectively called, is announced with a shout. Guards present arms. Hats are doffed. The soup is treated with more reverence than the average duke. The procession steps out of the kitchens and into the open air. This is the first hazard. If it is raining, the soup gets a little thinner. If it is windy, dust from the road, a mixture of pulverized stone and horse manure, swirls into the air and settles gently onto the roasted pheasants and artichokes. There are metal covers, of course, but they are not airtight seals. They rattle and shift as the servants hurry across the uneven cobblestones. They enter the palace through the service shuffling, navigating the dark, drafty corridors you explored earlier. Here, the food faces the gauntlet of the palace ecology. The corridors are cold, acting as long refrigeration tunnels. The heat bleeds out of the silver dishes, absorbed by the chill air. The rich sauces begin to thicken, the fat starting to congeal into a waxy film. By the time the meal travels the distance of several city blocks, climbing staircases and winding through passageways, it has lost its vibrant warmth. And then there are the pests. Versailles is home to a thriving population of mice and rats who live in the walls and under the floorboards. They are bold creatures, accustomed to the presence of humans. It is not unheard of for a particularly agile rodent to dart across a tray set down for a moment's rest, or for the droppings of a bat roosting in the rafters to descend upon a platter of fruit. The servants do their best to wave them away, but in the dim light of the tunnels, they cannot see everything. You watch the door of the antechamber now, waiting for the arrival of this travel-weary feast. The doors swing open, and the procession enters. The aroma hits you first. A rich, savory wave of roasted meat, heavy cream, and wine. Despite the journey, it smells incredible. Your hunger doubles. You watch as dish after dish is laid out on the table. There are soups, salads, roasts, pies, fruits, and pastries. It is a cornucopia of abundance, designed to show the world that France is a land of plenty. The king enters. The room goes silent. He walks with that characteristic rolling gait, his cane tapping softly on the floor. He takes his seat. He is the only one sitting. Everyone else, his family, the princes of the blood, the foreign ambassadors, stands in a semicircle watching. It is a theater of consumption. You observe the ritual of the Versailles, the testing of the food. The king's officers take small bites of the dishes or dip pieces of bread into the soups and sauces, then eat them in front of the monarch. This is the final safety check, the human shield against poison. Only after they have swallowed and failed to drop dead does the king begin. He eats with a ravenous appetite. Louis XIV is known for his ability to consume staggering amounts of food. He starts with 4 different plates of soup. You watch him lift the spoon, the liquid glinting in the candlelight. It is likely lukewarm at best, perhaps tepid is a generous description. He does not seem to mind. He has likely never eaten a truly hot meal in his life to him. This is just how food tastes, cool, heavy, and rich. He moves on to a whole pheasant, and here you witness a detail that feels shockingly modern in its lack of pretension, or perhaps shockingly primitive. He eats with his fingers. Forks exist. They have been introduced from Italy and are used by some of the more fashionable courtiers. But the king distrusts them. He views the fork as a dangerous, sharp instrument, unnecessary for a man who has hands. He skillfully tears the leg off the bird, holding the bone, and brings it to his mouth. Grace shines on his fingertips. This is the etiquette of the most refined court in Europe. The Sun King, covered in diamonds and lace, is gnawing on a bone like a medieval warrior. When he is finished, he wipes his greasy fingers on a wet napkin. There are no finger bowls with lemon slices here, just damp linen. You wonder about the cleanliness of that napkin. Was it washed in boiling water, or was it merely rinsed in the river? Given what you know about the laundry practices, it is best not to think too hard about it. You watch him tackle a dish of peas. Peas are a current obsession at court, a trendy vegetable that everyone is desperate to eat. The king loves them. He scoops them up, sometimes using a spoon, sometimes using a piece of bread as a shovel. He eats quickly, efficiently, his eyes scanning the room as he chews. He is working. Even while eating, he is observing his subjects, noting who is present and who is absent. The salad arrives. This is a point of contention for your modern sensibilities. In the 17th century, raw vegetables are viewed with suspicion. They are considered windy and difficult to digest. But the king enjoys a salad of lettuce and herbs. You watch the servant toss it. The greens have been washed, presumably, but in what water? The same water that flows through the lead pipes of the fountains. The risk of parasites is high. Dysentery and worms are common complaints among the nobility, often traced back to the consumption of raw produce washed in dubious water. But the king has a constitution of iron. He eats the salad, oil and vinegar dripping from the leaves, seemingly immune to the microscopic threats lurking in the folds of the lettuce. As the meal progresses, the air in the room becomes heavy with the smell of food mixing with the ever-present background notes of the palace. The heat from the dishes, however faint, warms the stagnant air. You feel a bead of sweat trickle down your back. You shift your weight, your feet aching. Watching someone else eat a 12-course meal while you are fasting is a specific kind of torture. You try to distract yourself by looking at the other spectators. They are all doing the same thing, feigning polite interest while secretly fantasizing about a ham sandwich. You notice a fly land on the rim of the king's goblet. It crawls along the gold, tasting the residue of the wine. A servant steps forward with a long, feathered wand and gently shoos it away. The fly buzzes angrily and lands on the shoulder of a nearby duke. The pests are democratic. They annoy king and courtier alike. In the summer, the flies are a plague. Attracted by the food, the waste, and the horses, they swarm the dining halls. You have to constantly wave your hand in front of your face to keep them at bay. The king calls for a drink. A boyar pour le roi. The cupbearer shouts. It is another ceremony. The wine is brought from a sideboard, tasted, and then diluted with water. The king rarely drinks pure wine. He prefers it watered down, a habit that probably saves him from the gout that plagues so many of his peers. The cup is presented on a salver. He drinks deeply, the red liquid staining his lips for a moment before he wipes them. You study the plates as they are cleared away. They are solid silver, heavy and scratched from years of use. They are not washed between courses in the modern sense. They are wiped down by servants with cloths at the sideboard. So, the residue of the ragout might linger faintly on the plate that now holds the fruit. It is a mingling of flavors that you would find appalling. But here, it is just efficiency. The speed of the service is paramount. The king does not like to wait. There is a strange intimacy to this public dining. You are watching the king chew, swallow, wipe his mouth. You see the biological reality of the man. He is not a god. He is an organism that needs fuel. And he needs a lot of it. The quantity he consumes is legendary. His sister-in-law once wrote that she saw him eat 4 plates of different soups, a whole pheasant, a partridge, a large plate of salad, 2 big slices of ham, mutton with gravy and garlic, a plate of pastry, and then fruit and hard-boiled eggs. And he does this without getting fat, a metabolic miracle that is the envy of the court. But you also see the danger. Every bite is a risk, not just from poison, but from the food itself. The meat has been sitting out. The cream has been traveling through warm corridors. The hygiene of the kitchen staff is questionable. It is a game of Russian roulette played with indigestion. The royal ailments. Gout, tapeworms, fluxes are the direct result of this diet. The king's body is a battlefield where the richness of the cuisine fights against the primitive sanitation of its preparation. As the meal winds down, the king finishes with candied fruits and hard, boiled eggs. It is a strange dessert, but he loves eggs. He cracks the shell on the table, peeling it with those same greasy fingers. You imagine the sulphurous smell of the egg mixing with the perfume of the room. It is a sensory overload. Finally, he stands. The chair is pulled back. He creates a sign of the cross, muttering a quick grace. The performance is over. The mate of the king has been consumed. The courtiers bow low as he turns to leave, heading back to his cabinet for more work. You straighten up, your back popping audibly. The crowd begins to disperse, the tension breaking. Now comes the scramble for the leftovers, the food that the king did not touch, and there is a mountain of it, is not thrown away. It trickles down the hierarchy. The highest ranking officers get the first pick, taking whole chickens and untouched pies back to their apartments. Then the lesser servants get what remains. Finally, the scraps might be sold at the palace gates to the commoners. It is a trickle-down economy of gastronomy. By the time that pheasant leg reaches the bottom of the food chain, it has been handled, breathed on, and carried through the palace for hours. It is a wonder the entire population of Versailles isn't constantly bedridden with food poisoning. You navigate your way out of the antechamber, the phantom taste of roast meat in your mouth. You are starving. You will have to find your own lunch now. Perhaps there is a vendor in the courtyard selling meat pies, or a tavern in the town of Versailles where you can get a stew. You know the hygiene there will be no better, likely worse, than what you just witnessed. But at least you won't have to wait for a procession of guards to deliver it. As you walk away, you think about the long walk of the soup. You imagine the servants hurrying through the rain, the dust settling on the broth. You think about the cold, congealed fat. It is a perfect metaphor for the rain, magnificent presentation, gold and silver, ritual and pomp, but at its core, a little bit cold, a little bit dirty, and requiring a strong stomach to endure. You pass a servant carrying a tray of dirty silver plates back toward the Grand Common. The sauce has dried onto the metal. A fly buzzes around the stack. The servant looks exhausted. The cycle continues. Dinner will be served in a few hours, and the whole logistical nightmare will begin again. The fires will be stoked, the rats will be shooed, and the cold soup will march once more toward the king. You step into a quieter gallery, the noise of the dining room fading behind you. The light here is soft, filtering through dust-moated windows. You take a deep breath, trying to clear the smell of food from your nose. You are ready for a change of scenery. The heavy meal has made the air feel thicker, or perhaps that is just your own hunger weighing you down. You need to keep moving, to keep exploring this palace of contradictions. There are still mysteries to uncover, layers of silk and powder to peel back. You glance at your own hands. They feel gritty. You rub your thumb against your fingers, feeling the inevitable accumulation of the day's dust. You wish, briefly, for a wet napkin like the king's. It wouldn't make you clean. Not really, but it would be a start. You wipe your hands on your coat, a gesture that feels rebellious and resigned all at once. You are adapting. You are becoming a creature of Versailles. You leave the lingering aroma of the dining antechamber and drift toward the Grande Gallery, seeking a space where the air might be less saturated with the scent of roast meats. However, as you step into the flow of the afternoon crowd, you realize that you are merely trading one overpowering sensory experience for another. You are now wading through a sea of white foam. Everywhere you look, heads are encased in massive, cloud-like structures of artificial hair. This is the era of the periwig, the peruke, and at Versailles, hair is not just a biological feature. It is a monument to status, engineering, and endurance. You observe the sheer altitude of the people around you. The men, in particular, seem to have gained 6 inches in height and a foot in width. Their heads are crowned with cascading torrents of curls that tumble down their backs and spill over their shoulders like woolen waterfalls. These are not modest hairpieces. They are architectural marvels called allonge wigs, popularized by the king himself to compensate for his own thinning hair and to project an image of leonine power. As you navigate the crowd, you feel the soft, brushing touch of horsehair against your sleeve as a duke turns too quickly. The hallway is effectively carpeted with mobile hair. But as you stand close to a group of courtiers engaged in hushed conversation, you begin to understand the true price of this majesty. The heat in the gallery is sweltering, magnified by the mirrors reflecting the afternoon sun. You can only imagine the temperature inside those wigs. To wear one is effectively to wear a thick wool blanket strapped to your head in the middle of July. You watch a bead of sweat escape from the hairline of a nearby marquis, tracking a slow, shiny path through the white powder on his forehead before disappearing into his eyebrow. He dabs it away with a lace handkerchief, careful not to disturb the snowy drift above. The foundation of this fashion is, ironically, the removal of nature. To wear a wig properly, one must be shaved bald. You imagine the morning ritual of these men, the razor scraping across the scalp, leaving the skin raw and pink, a vulnerable, egg-like dumb that is hidden from the world at all costs. The wig is then glued or clamped onto this naked surface. The scalp, deprived of air and trapped under layers of canvas, ribbon, and hair, begins to sweat. It creates a humid, tropical microclimate between the skin and the wig cap, a perfect breeding ground for all manner of biological activity. You find yourself fascinated by the texture of the hair itself. While the king's wigs are made of the finest human hair, sourced, rumors say, from peasants in the provinces or even from the corpses of the young and healthy. Most courtiers cannot afford such luxury. Their wigs are a patchwork of horsehair, goat hair, and wool. You look closely at the curls of a lesser noble. The strands are coarse, thick, and lifeless. They do not shine like human hair, they absorb the light. They look heavy, and indeed they are. A full, bottomed wig can weigh several pounds. It is a burden that pulls on the neck muscles, forcing the wearer to hold his head high and stiff, contributing to that haughty, nose-in, the air posture that defines the aristocracy. But the hair is only the scaffolding. The true finish comes from the powder. You catch a whiff of the air as a lady passes, fanning herself vigorously. The scent is distinct violet, iris root, and dough. Yes, The underlying smell of the French court is the smell of a bakery. The white powder that coats every fashionable head is actually finely milled wheat flour. In a time when the peasants of France are periodically rioting over the price of bread, the nobility is dusting pounds of edible flour onto their heads every morning to look pale and interesting. It is a staggering display of conspicuous consumption. You picture the process of applying this powder. It is not a gentle dusting. It is an industrial operation. The courtier sits in a small closet, draped in a cone of fabric or a protective cape to keep the powder off his velvet coat. The valet takes a bellows, literally a fireplace tool modified for fashion, filled with the flour mixture. He pumps the bellows, blasting a cloud of white dust at the courtier's head. The room fills with a fog of starch. It coats the lungs, the furniture, the walls. When the courtier emerges, he is a statue of white, his eyebrows and eyelashes frosted, his wig a uniform, matte perfection. However, dry flour does not stick to dry hair. To make the powder adhere, the wig must first be greased. This is where the smell becomes complicated. The fixative of choice is pomatum, a thick, sticky paste made from animal fat, usually lard or bear grease, mixed with wax and perfumes. You can smell it now, beneath the floral top notes of the perfume. It is the heavy, rancid scent of old fat. As the day warms up, the fat begins to melt. It mixes with the sweat on the scalp and the flour on the surface, creating a kind of paste that slowly turns rancid in the heat. The perfume, musk, civet, ambergris, is applied heavily to mask this, but it only adds another layer to the cloying, suffocating bouquet. You watch a man standing near the window. He reaches into his waistcoat and pulls out a small, slender object. It looks like a chopstick made of ivory, topped with a small golden hand. It is a grattoir, a scratching stick. He slips it discreetly under the edge of his wig, maneuvering it blindly until he finds the spot that is tormenting him. You see his eyes close briefly in pure, unadulterated relief as he scratches the itch that has been driving him mad for an hour. The grattoir is an essential accessory. Without it, the courtier would be forced to claw at his own head like a commoner, ruining the structure of the curls. With it, he can address the screaming itch of his scalp with elegant, detached precision. The itch is not just from heat or sweat. It is often from movement. The wigs are ecosystems. Lice are the great levelers of Versailles. They do not care about titles or lineage. They only care about blood and warmth. And a heavy, greasy, horsehair wig sitting on a sweaty scalp is a louse's paradise. You realize that almost everyone in this room is likely hosting a small colony of parasites. The itching is constant. You see it in the small twitches of the head, the sudden stiffness of the neck, the frequent use of the scratching stick. Historians still argue about how the court dealt with this infestation. Some say they boiled the wigs, which seems unlikely as it would ruin the expensive curls. Others suggest they baked them in ovens, like loaves of bread, to kill the nits with heat. Imagine the kitchen staff sliding trays of wigs into the ovens between batches of pastries, the smell of singed hair mixing with the dinner prep. It is a grotesque image, yet entirely plausible in this world of do hygiene. The ladies are not exempt from this torture. In fact, their suffering might be worse. You turn your gaze to a duchess entering the room. Her hair is a tower, a style known as the fontaine. It rises vertically from her forehead, a structure of wire, ribbon, lace, and false hair that defies gravity. It is so tall that she has to duck slightly to pass through the doorway. The construction of such a hairstyle is a feat of engineering. The hair is frizzed and piled over a wire frame, cemented in place with the same mixture of grease and powder. Because these styles are so elaborate and time-consuming to create, they are not taken down every night. A lady might keep her head done for a week or more. You try to imagine sleeping with a wire cage on your head, your neck strained by the weight, unable to rest your cheek against the pillow. And during those long nights, the structure remains warm and protected. There are stories, perhaps exaggerated, perhaps not, of mice finding their way into these towering hairstyles while the women sleep, nesting in the flour, dusted wool. Whether true or not, the fear is real. You notice some women wearing elaborate nightcaps that tie tightly under the chin, not just for warmth, but as a barrier against nocturnal invaders. The weight of the fontaine causes headaches. You see the Duchess pressing her fingers against her temples, her eyes tight with pain. The traction on the scalp is immense. The hair is pulled so tight to achieve the height that it can cause receding hairlines and permanent hair loss. But she smiles, snaps her fan open, and curtsies to a passing prince. The pain is the price of admission. To be fashionable is to suffer. You walk closer to a mirror on the wall, pretending to adjust your own modest collar. You catch the reflection of the crowd behind you. It is a sea of white, a ghostly assembly. The powder is everywhere. It falls like dandruff on the shoulders of the black velvet coats. It settles in the creases of the neck. It dusts the eyelashes. It makes everyone look older, turning young men into prematurely gray elders. This is the desired effect, a uniform look of wisdom and gravitas, erasing the differences of age. But up close, the illusion fractures. You see the clumps where the flour has mixed with sweat. You see the yellowing of the curls near the neck where the grease has oxidized. You see the dead, matty texture of the goat hair. The poudre room, or the powdering closet, must be a nightmare of respiratory health. You imagine the valets who work there, breathing in clouds of flour day after day. Their lungs must be coated in a white paste. It is a silent occupational hazard, a sacrifice made so that the Duke can look frosty for his 2-minute audience with the king. And what of the hair itself? Where does it all come from? The demand for hair at Versailles is insatiable. The dark trade of hair harvesting scars the countryside. Peasant girls with long, healthy tresses are paid pennies to be shorn like sheep. The hair of the dead is snipped before they are buried. It is all boiled, cleaned, hopefully, curled, and shipped to the palace. You look at the wig of the man in front of you. Who did that hair belong to? A milkmaid from Normandy? A nun who took the veil? A soldier who died in a field hospital? Their biological material is now part of the costume of a courtier, animated by the movements of a stranger. It is a macabre form of recycling. You drift toward a window seat, needing to sit down. The air near the window is slightly fresher, though it still carries the scent of the stables outside. You watch a fly land on a lady's high coiffure. It navigates the sticky, powdered ridges of her hair, getting its legs caught in the pomatum. It struggles, buzzing angrily. She doesn't feel it. Her hair is so thick, so built up, that she has lost all sensation on the top of her head. The fly is just another decoration now. The sheer maintenance of these wigs requires a small army of barbers and wig makers. They are the keepers of the secrets. They see the bald heads, the sores, the grey stubble. They are the ones who take the wigs away for refreshing, combating the smell and the limpness that sets in after a few days of wear. You can spot the wig makers in the crowd. They are the ones looking critically at the backs of people's heads, judging the quality of the curl and the whiteness of the powder. They know that the king's wig alone costs more than a standard house in Paris. It is an economy built on vanity. As the sun begins to lower, casting long, golden beams into the gallery, the dust motes in the air become visible. You realize that a significant percentage of that dust is suspended flour and hair particles. You are breathing in the wigs of your neighbors. You cough softly, covering your mouth, tasting the starch on your tongue. You think about the disconnect between the visual grandeur and the physical reality. From 10 feet away, these people look like gods. Tall, imposing, crowned in white halos. Up close, they smell of the barnyard and the bakery. They are scratching at parasites, and they are sweating under layers of dead hair. It is a perfect metaphor for the rain. The surface is impeccable, a triumph of artifice. The reality underneath is itchy, smelly, and uncomfortable. Tonight, when the candles are snuffed out and the doors are closed, the wigs will come off. You imagine the relief, the heavy, hot weight lifted from the head, the cool air hitting the damp, shaved scalp, the scratching, the real, frantic scratching that can finally happen without the ivory stick, the transition from the public giant to the private, bald human. It must be a moment of profound vulnerability. Without the wig, the courtier shrinks. He loses his height, his frame, his majesty. He becomes just a small, tired man with a pale head. But for now, the wigs stay on. The performance must continue. You watch a young man, clearly new to court, struggling with the weight of his first full wig. He keeps tilting his head back, trying to balance the mass. He looks miserable, his eyes watering from the powder. But he is smiling, desperate to fit in. He has joined the club of the itchy and the beautiful. You decide to move on, to leave the hall of mirrors and its powdered population. You need to find a place where the air isn't quite so thick with flour. But as you walk away, you feel a phantom itch on your own scalp, a sympathetic reaction to the scratching you have witnessed. You run a hand through your own hair, grateful that it is yours, grateful that it is attached to your head, and grateful that it is not covered in lard. The corridor ahead is darker, leading toward the medical apartments. You have survived the smell of the drains, the sight of the king eating with his fingers, and the cloud of human flour. Now, you are ready to face the men who are responsible for keeping these bodies alive, the royal physicians. You have heard stories of their methods, the bleedings, the purges, the obsession with the humours. If you thought the hygiene was horrifying, wait until you see the healthcare. You pause for a moment to brush a smudge of white powder from your sleeve. It is stubborn, greasy, and refuses to leave. It leaves a faint, pale stain on the dark fabric. You have been marked by the court. You carry the dust of Versailles with you now. You push open the heavy oak door leading to the next section, leaving the rustle of stiff horsehair behind you, but taking the memory of the smell, that cloying mix of violets, sweat, and rancid fat, with you into the shadows. You leave the suffocating cloud of flour and hair in the hall of mirrors, seeking a different kind of atmosphere. You find yourself drawn toward the quieter, more somber wing of the palace, where the air feels heavier, charged with a hushed reverence that isn't about majesty, but about mortality. You are entering the domain of the medical faculty, the inner sanctum where the Sun King's biological reality is battled, managed, and often accidentally worsened by the most learned men in France. The smell here is distinct, sharp, metallic, and medicinal. It is the scent of dried herbs, vinegar, blood, and the ominous, metallic tang of heated iron. You slip into a dimly lit antechamber, the Cabinet des Bassins. This is where the instruments of the king's health are kept. The room is lined with shelves holding jars of strange, floating specimens and pots of ceramic ointment. You see a group of men in dark, severe robes standing in a tight circle, whispering in Latin. These are the physicians, the apothecaries, and the barber surgeons. They are the mechanics of the royal body, tasked with keeping the divine engine running despite a diet of endless meat and a lifestyle of crushing stress. To your modern eyes, these men look less like doctors and more like magicians or perhaps high priests of a grim cult. They do not believe in germs or viruses. They believe in humors, blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. They believe that health is a balance of these fluids, and sickness is an imbalance. Their solution to almost every problem is to open the tap and let the fluids out. You watch one of them polishing a silver lancet, the blade glinting in the candlelight. It is a beautiful, terrifying object, designed to slice into a vein with elegant precision. You are here to witness the daily struggle of Louis XIV against his own body. For all his gold and glory, the king is a man in constant pain. His medical record is a thick, horrifying catalogue of 17th century ailments. He suffers from gout, which makes his red, heeled walk a performance of agony. He has chronic headaches, likely from the weight of the wigs and the fumes of the palace. He has reoccurring fevers, boils, and indigestion. And you, the silent observer, are about to see how these are treated. The first thing you notice is the obsession with purgation. The doctors are convinced that the king's internal chimney needs constant sweeping. You see a servant carrying a large, menacing metal syringe the size of a trombone slide. This is the clyster, the instrument of the enema. It is the signature treatment of the age. The king does not just endure these, he champions them. Over his lifetime, he will receive more than 2,000 enemas, sometimes while holding court, discreetly hidden behind a screen or simply under the covers while he chats with ambassadors. It is viewed as a refreshing hygiene practice, a way to wash the blood and cool the system. You watch as the physicians prepare a mixture for the king's next treatment. They grind rhubarb, senna, and rose honey in a mortar. The sound of the pestle hitting the stone is rhythmic, almost hypnotic. It sounds like cooking, but the result is a violent intestinal explosion. Historians still argue whether this aggressive regimen of constant purging actually helped his constitution, or if it slowly stripped his body of essential nutrients, leaving him weaker against infection. Regardless, the king submits to it with the stoicism of a soldier. He believes in his doctors, even when their logic seems to be, if it hurts, it's working. But the true horror and the true bravery of the king's medical history lies in his mouth. You move closer to a display of dental instruments. They are crude, brutal things: pliers, hooks, and levers that look like they belong in a blacksmith's forge. The king has terrible teeth. The sugar, heavy diet, and the lack of brushing have taken their toll. By middle age, he has lost most of his upper teeth. You recall the whispers about the great dental disaster of 1685. The king's personal dentist, a man named Daquin, believed that all teeth were essentially rotten bones that needed to be removed to prevent infection. In a fit of zeal, while pulling a molar from the king's upper left jaw, he pulled too hard. He fractured the jawbone and tore out a piece of the palate. You wince just thinking about it. There was no anesthesia, no numbing shot. Just the King of France gripping the arms of his chair, while a man with pliers broke his face. The result was a hole connecting his mouth to his nasal cavity. For the rest of his life, when the king drinks wine, a little bit of it trickles out of his nose. It is a humiliating, messy reality for a man who is supposed to be a god. But he never complains. He wipes his nose with a handkerchief and continues the conversation. To fix the wound, the doctors cauterized it, burned it, with a hot iron, again, while he was fully awake. You look at the iron rod resting on the table now. It is cold and black, but you can almost smell the singed flesh. The king's endurance is legendary. He views pain as something to be conquered, a test of his royal will. But the defining medical moment of the reign, the event that held all of Europe in breath, was the grand operation of 1686. You wander over to a glass case where a peculiar knife is displayed. It is a bisturi, but it is curved, custom, made for a very specific, very delicate purpose. The king developed a fistula, an infected tunnel in his lower regions. It was agonizing. He could not ride a horse. He could not sit on the throne. He had to conduct meetings lying down or standing up. The court was in a panic. If the king died, the stability of France would collapse. The doctors tried everything: poultices, ointments, prayers, waters from the holy spa at Barges. Nothing worked. Finally, the chief surgeon, Charles Félix, proposed a radical solution: surgery. At this time, surgery was considered a lowly trade, performed by barbers, not gentlemen physicians. To cut the king was high treason. If the knife slipped, if the infection spread, Félix would be executed, and the king would be dead. You can feel the tension of that memory in the room. Félix asked for 6 months to prepare. He did not practice on cadavers. He needed live tissue. He practiced on peasants and soldiers who had similar conditions. Many of them did not survive. They were the silent martyrs of the royal bottom. Félix designed special instruments, including the curved blade you are looking at now, and a retractor to hold the wound open. On the morning of November 18, 1686, the operation took place in absolute secrecy. You can picture the scene in the king's bedroom. The shutters are drawn. The king lies on the edge of the bed, a pillow under his stomach. The minister of war, Louis, holds the king's hand. Madame de Maintenon, his secret wife, is praying in the corner. Félix stands there, his hands trembling slightly until he picks up the knife, at which point he becomes rock steady. He makes the cut. The king does not scream. He reportedly said, "Is it done, gentlemen? Treat me as you would a peasant." The fortitude is superhuman. The surgery was a success. The infection was drained, the tract was cut, and the king survived. And then something truly bizarre happened. You watch a group of courtiers walking past the medical wing, walking with a slight, affected limp. When the news broke that the king had been operated on for a fistula, the condition became fashionable. This is the quirky tidbit that defies all logic. Courtiers began to fake having a fistula. They walked with canes, wincing dramatically when they sat down. Some even paid surgeons to bandage them as if they had been operated on. They wanted to share in the king's suffering, to be physically aligned with the monarch's body. The fistula became the badge of honor of 1686. It is a testament to the cult of personality at Versailles. The king's body is the state. If the state hurts, the people must hurt. If the state has no teeth, the people stop smiling. You shake your head, marveling at the absurdity of it. You turn your attention back to the physicians. They are discussing the king's diet. One of them suggests that the king should stop eating so much spicy stew, as it heats the blood. Another argues that the spice is necessary to stimulate the digestion. They argue in circles, citing Galen and Hippocrates, ancient Greeks who never saw a potato or a tomato. The king, meanwhile, continues to eat what he wants, and the doctors continue to bleed him when he feels heavy. The bleeding is the other pillar of their practice. You see a bowl, palette, used to catch the blood. It is made of pewter, battered and stained. They bleed the king for headaches, for fevers, for vapors. They take ounces of vital fluid from a man who is already fighting infection. It is a miracle he isn't anemic. You imagine the feeling of the lancet, the sudden warmth of the blood running down the arm, the lightheadedness that follows. The doctors nod sagely, convinced they have released the bad humors. In reality, they are just slowly draining the battery of the machine. There is a dark corner of the room where the preventative medicines are kept. You pick up a jar and read the label. Theriac. This is the miracle cure. All of the Middle Ages still in use. It is a black, sticky paste made of over 60 ingredients, including viper flesh, opium, roasted copper, and dried toad. The king takes this regularly. He is ingesting trace amounts of poison and heavy metals every week in the name of health. You wonder if the lead in the water pipes or the viper flesh in the medicine is the greater threat. The king's physician, Fagan, is a terrifying figure in his own right. He is hunchbacked, asthmatic, and has a biting wit. He dominates the court with his medical decrees. To cross Fagan is to be banished from the sickbed. He controls access to the king when he is vulnerable. You watch a shadow that might be Fagon moving in the back room, mixing a potion. He is the gatekeeper of the king's mortality. He knows the secrets of the royal body, the lumps, the scars, the smells, better than the queen does. As you stand in this room of sharp knives and bitter herbs, you realize that for all the luxury of Versailles, the physical experience of living here is one of constant, low-level agony. The clothes are tight and hot. The wigs are itchy. The food is rich and risky. And the medical care is terrifying. Pain is a constant companion. There are no aspirins for a headache, no antibiotics for a cut. A simple blister can become a death sentence. The king's stoicism becomes even more impressive in this light. He rules the world while his jaw aches, while his gut churns, while his surgery heals. He stands for hours in the hall of mirrors, smiling, while his body screams. It is a performance of endurance art. You hear a bell chime in the distance. The medical consultation is over for the day. The doctors pack up their lancets and their jars. They wipe the table down with vinegar, a rare nod to disinfection, though they do it to remove the smell, not the germs. You watch them leave, their black robes trailing on the floor like the wings of crows. They are the harbingers of hard truths. You decide to leave the medical wing before you start feeling phantom pains in your own jaw. You step back out into the corridor. The air here feels lighter, less burdened by the scent of blood and iron. But you carry the image of that curved knife with you. It is a reminder that the Sun King is made of meat and bone, just like the peasant in the field. The gold leaf covers the walls, but it cannot coat the insides of the body. You walk toward the king's bedchamber, the destination for the night. The sun has set, and the palace is shifting into its nocturnal mode. The candles are being lit, thousands of them, casting a warm, flickering glow that hides the dirt and the dust. The shadows lengthen, softening the harsh edges of reality. You pass a group of servants lighting the sconces in the hallway. They move quickly, efficient fireflies in the gloom. The smell of beeswax fills the air, masking the lingering medicinal scent. It is a comforting smell, the smell of the evening ritual beginning. You think about the king preparing for bed. The removal of the wig, the unlacing of the stays, the relief of the body. But also the fear. The night is when the ailments strike hardest. The gout throbs in the dark. The digestion rebels. The doctors are always close by, sleeping in the next room, ready with their lancets and their clysters. There is no true privacy, even in pain. As you approach the heavy double doors of the bedchamber, you feel a wave of exhaustion. It has been a long day of sensory overload. You have smelled the drains, the food, the powder, and the blood. You are ready for the stillness of the night. You want to see how the palace sleeps, how it shuts down, or doesn't, under the cover of darkness. You pause at the threshold. The guard nods to you, a silent permission to enter the outer circle of the culture, the putting to bed ceremony. You step inside, leaving the ghosts of the surgery behind you. You are entering the final act of the day, the closing of the royal eye. The show is almost over, but the machinery of the court never truly stops. It just lowers its voice to a whisper. The day at Versailles does not end with a simple extinguishing of lights. It retreats, layer by layer, into a heavy, suffocating intimacy. You have navigated the grand, smelly open spaces of the courtyard, the crowded, flower-dusted corridors of the afternoon, and the sharp, metallic anxiety of the medical wing. Now, you stand at the threshold of the final act, the culture, the formal putting to bed of the king. The sun has long since surrendered the sky to a deep, velvety indigo, but inside the palace, the artificial suns are just reaching their peak. Thousands of wax candles burn in crystal chandeliers and silver sconces, casting a golden, trembling light that softens the harsh realities of the day. The dirt on the floor is hidden in shadow. The peeling paint is lost in the glow. You enter the king's bedchamber once more. The atmosphere has shifted from the frantic energy of the morning levee. The room feels closer, warmer, almost womb-like. The crimson brocade on the walls seems to absorb the sound, muffling the footsteps of the courtiers who have gathered for this final ceremony. The air is thick, not just with the usual cocktail of sweat and perfume, but with the scent of beeswax and the smoke from extinguished wicks. It is a drowsy, narcotic smell, The ritual begins, a mirror image of the morning. The king stands by the balustrade, the symbolic fence that separates the sacred body of the monarch from the rest of the nobility. He is tired. You can see it in the way his shoulders slump slightly when he thinks no one is looking, in the heaviness of his eyelids. But he does not stop performing. He says his prayers, kneeling on a velvet cushion. The entire room watches. To pray with the king is a political act. You bow your head, feigning piety, but your eyes are tracing the patterns on the carpet, watching the play of shadows. Then, the disrobing. It is a slow, deliberate shedding of the royal persona. The hat is handed off. The sword is unbuckled. The blue ribbon of the Order of the Holy Spirit is removed. Each item is passed to a specific officer, a chain of custody that has been codified for generations. The coat comes off, revealing the waistcoat, then the shirt. You are watching the dismantling of a monument. The Grand Chamberlain receives the coat. The Master of the Wardrobe takes the vest. It is a silent ballet of fabric. The wig is removed. This is the most jarring moment. The massive, towering black curls are lifted away, revealing the king's natural hair, which is thin, gray, and cropped short. He suddenly looks smaller, older, and intensely human. He is no longer the Sun King. He is Louis, a man in his 60s with a bad jaw and aching legs. A nightcap is produced immediately to cover the royal head. It is not a simple cotton cap, but an elaborate creation of silk and lace. Because even in sleep, one must be majestic. You watch the candlestick rite, one of the most coveted honors of the court. As the king prepares to get into bed, the usher calls out a name. It is the person chosen to hold the king's candlestick while he finishes his toilet. Tonight, it is a young duke, his face flushed with pride. He steps forward, taking the silver holder. He holds it high, illuminating the king's face. To hold the candle is to be the last thing the king sees before he sleeps. It is a promise of favor, a signal to the rest of the room that this man is on the rise. You feel a pang of jealousy, or perhaps just relief that it isn't you holding the heavy silver object. Terrified of dripping hot wax onto the royal nightshirt, the king climbs into the bed. It is a massive structure, a lit to la duchess, meaning it has a canopy that extends from the wall but no front posts, creating a grand stage for the sleeper. The bed stands on a platform, raising the sleeper above the common level of the floor. It is draped in yards of heavy, embroidered velvet, trimmed with gold fringe that sways slightly as the king settles into the mattress. And what a mattress it is! Or rather, mattresses. There are several layers, a straw paillasse at the bottom for firmness, then wool mattresses, then a feather bed of down for softness. It is a cloud engineered for comfort. But you know the secret of that cloud. You know that despite the daily beatings by the servants, despite the fresh linen sheets, the bed is not empty. Bedbugs are the silent conquerors of Versailles. They live in the woodwork of the intricate headboards. They hide in the folds of the velvet curtains. They are democratic parasites, feasting on the blood of kings and scullery maids alike. You can imagine the king, later in the night, shifting his legs, feeling the telltale prickle. He will not complain. He will simply endure it as he endures the doctors. It is just another discomfort in a life of public service. Once the king is in bed, the room begins to clear. Allans, Messieurs, the usher whispers. The crowd bows and backs out of the room. careful never to turn their backs on the bed. You shuffle out with them, moving from the warmth of the bedroom into the slightly cooler air of the antechamber. But you do not go far. Your own night is just beginning, and it will be a mirror of what you just witnessed, albeit on a much smaller, less gilded scale. You make your way to your own quarters. If you are lucky, very lucky, you have a small room in the attic or a partitioned space in a corridor. You climb the narrow, winding stairs that lead to the upper floors. The air gets hotter as you ascend. Heat rises, and in the summer, the slate roof acts as a radiator, baking the garrets long after the sun has set. The smell here is stuffy, the scent of old wood and dry dust. You enter your room. It is tiny, barely large enough for a bed and a wardrobe. There is no ventilation. The window is small, a lucarne, set into the roof, and it is sealed tight. You go to open it, desperate for a breath of cool night air. But you stop. You remember the warnings. Night air is dangerous. This is a medical fact accepted by every learned person in Europe. The night air carries miasma, the invisible vapors that rise from the swamps and the stagnant water of the fountains. It carries agues, fevers, and death. If you open that window, you are inviting the devil into your lungs. You might wake up with a paralyzed face, or a chest cough that never goes away, or simply dead. The fear of the draft is primal. So you leave the window latch alone. You choose the stifling heat over the invisible poison. You begin your own undressing. You strip off the coat, the heavy waistcoat, the breeches. Your skin feels clammy. You have been marinating in your own sweat for 14 hours. You wipe your face with a dry cloth, removing the top layer of grime and powder. There is no water for a wash. The jugs in the hallway are empty, and even if they weren't, water is for drinking, not for splashing on the body at this hour. You remove your wig. The sensation is exquisite. The cool air hits your shaved scalp, and you let out a long, involuntary sigh. You reach for your own scratching stick, or just use your fingernails, digging into the skin that has been suffocated all day. It is a moment of pure animal relief. You hang the wig on a stand. It looks like a small, dead animal perched there in the shadows, waiting to consume you again in the morning. You put on your nightshirt. It is linen, hopefully clean, though clean is a relative term. You climb into your bed. It is not a royal bed. It is a box bed, shorter than you are tall. This is intentional. You do not sleep lying flat. To lie flat is to resemble a corpse, a position of death. It is also believed to cause the blood to pool in the head, leading to strokes or apoplexy. So, you sleep propped up on 3 or 4 pillows, almost in a sitting position. It is better for digestion, they say, helping the heavy meal you ate, or watched the king eat, to settle in your stomach. You pull the curtains of the bed closed around you. This is the final seal. The bed curtains are thick, heavy wool or velvet. They are designed to create a room within a room, a micro-environment completely cut off from the outside world. Historians still argue whether the heavy velvet drapes were primarily intended to trap warmth during the frigid winters of the Little Ice Age, or to create a soundproof barrier against the constant, churning noise of the court that never truly slept. Tonight, however, they feel like the walls of a fortress. Inside the curtains, it is pitch black. You can't see your hand in front of your face. The space warms up quickly with your body heat. It becomes a humid, fragrant capsule. You smell the lavender that was pressed into the sheets to deter the bugs. You smell the feathers of the pillow. You smell the lingering scent of the chamber pot that you have slid under the bed, just in case. Ah, the chamber pot. The pot de chamber. It is the unsung hero of the night. There are no trips down the hall to a bathroom in the dark. That would be madness. You have your porcelain vessel right there within arm's reach. If you need it, you use it, then slide it back. The smell is contained, mostly, by a lid or simply by the heavy drape of the bed valance. You lie there, knowing it is beneath you, a reservoir of reality inches from your dreams. You settle into the pillows, your knees drawn up. The silence of the room is not total. Versailles is a living organism. You hear the creak of floorboards as someone walks down the corridor outside your door. Is it a lover sneaking to an illicit rendezvous? A spy delivering a message? A servant fetching wine for a late night card game? The walls are thin. You hear a muffled laugh, the slam of a door, the distant bark of a dog in the courtyard. The bed itself makes noise. The straw in the mattress rustles every time you move. It sounds like you are sleeping in a barn, which, in a way, you are. You feel a tickle on your ankle. You freeze. A bug. You reach down, trying to brush it away in the dark. You fail. You accept it. You are too tired to hunt. You let the palace claim its tithe of blood. On the small table beside your bed, you have placed your uncas. This is the in case a meal, a small plate of cold meat, a roll of bread, and a glass of watered wine. It is there in case you wake up hungry in the middle of the night. The king has a massive cause prepared for him every night. Cold fowl, bottles of wine, napkins, sitting ready on his nightstand. You have a crust and a slice of ham, but it is comforting to know it is there. It is a hedge against the uncertainty of the night. As you lie there, staring into the blackness of the canopy, your mind replays the sensory assault of the day, the blinding gold of the gate, the smell of the open drains, the taste of the dust, the feel of the greasy wig. It all swirls together into a fever dream of luxury and squalor. You realize that you are living in the center of the world, the envy of every person in Europe. You are at Versailles. You have seen the king. You have walked in the hall of mirrors. But you are also trapped in a velvet box, breathing recycled air, scratching at lice, and sleeping above a chamber pot. The grandeur is a heavy cloak that you cannot take off. The heat in the enclosed bed is rising. You kick off the heavy quilt, lying only under the sheet. You can hear the wind howling outside, rattling the slate tiles of the roof. It is a wild, chaotic sound, a reminder of the nature that Louis XIV has tried to tame with his geometry and his fountains. But nature is still there, pressing against the glass, waiting for a crack in the facade. You think about the thousands of other people sleeping around you in this stone hive. The Swiss guards in their barracks, sleeping on cots. The scullery maids in the kitchens, sleeping on piles of sacks. The princes in their silk beds. The dogs in the kennels. The horses in the stables. Everyone is suspended in this moment of rest, waiting for the sun to rise so the performance can begin again. The king is sleeping now. Or perhaps he is awake, staring at the ceiling, worrying about the war in Holland, or the state of his soul, or the pain in his jaw. In the dark, he is just a man. The gold is invisible. The wig is on the stand. He is alone in his box. Just like you are in yours. Your breathing slows. The air in the tented bed feels thick, like breathing soup, but it is a familiar, comforting thickness. It smells of humanity. It smells of safety. You let your shoulders drop, the tension of the court posture, finally leaving your muscles. You do not have to bow to anyone in here. You do not have to smile. You do not have to pretend. You listen to the rhythm of the palace settling. A timber groans. A mouse skitters across the floorboards, its tiny claws clicking on the wood. It is likely heading for your encas. You let it go. There is enough bread for everyone. The darkness is absolute. It presses against your eyes, a physical weight. It is the counterweight to the blinding sun of the day. You need this darkness to survive the light. You need this filth to survive the gold. You drift, floating on the straw mattress, a passenger on the great, creaking ship of state that is sailing through the night. You are tired, so incredibly tired. The history books will remember the battles and the treaties and the buildings. They will forget the smell. They will forget the itch, but you will remember. You were there. You felt the grit on the floor. You tasted the stale air. You survived the hygiene of the Sun King. And now, finally, you can sleep. The curtains are drawn. The world is shut out. The performance is paused. And so, the heavy velvet curtains fall shut, sealing you into the warm, quiet dark. The blinding glare of the hall of mirrors is gone, replaced by the soft, comforting blackness of your private sanctuary. The noise of the court, the gossip, the clattering wheels, the rustle of stiff silk, fades into a distant, rhythmic hum, like the sound of the ocean heard from far away. You are safe here. The demands of the day have dissolved. There is no one to impress, no one to bow to, nowhere you need to be. Feel the weight of the day. Simply slide off your frame. The tension in your neck, the ache in your feet from the hard marble floors, the stiffness in your shoulders. It all melts into the mattress beneath you. You are held up by the soft layers of straw and wool, supported and cradled. The air around you is still and warm, wrapping you in a cozy, protective haze that slows your thoughts and deepens your breath. Let your mind drift back gently over the path we walk tonight. See the golden gate standing silent under the moon. See the long, empty corridors now peaceful and shadowed. See the gardens, where the fountains have ceased their dance and the water sleeps in the basins. The palace is resting, and so are you. The history has been told, the facts have been gathered, and now they drift away like smoke from a snuffed candle, leaving only a sense of peace. Breathe in slowly, filling your chest with the calm of the night. Breathe out, releasing the last of the waking world. You are just a quiet presence in the dark, floating, drifting, sinking deeper into the soft embrace of sleep. Everything is okay. The sun will rise when it rises, but for now, the night is yours.